Information presented on Sky News Real Estate is general in nature. Viewers should seek their own professional advice before purchasing products or services. Sky News Real Estate may receive a fee for commercial arrangements with companies featured in this programming. Sky News Real Estate. Smart Investing.
Hello and welcome to Smart Investing. I'm Chris Gray. On tonight's show, what are the main reasons to invest in Queensland over Sydney, Melbourne or Perth? How easy is it for an investor to buy something interstate? And how can a buyer's agent assist you with a home or an investment purchase? Well, joining us tonight is Zoran Solano from Hot Property Buyers Agency in Brisbane and Charles Tarby, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Well, I thought we'd do a show on Brisbane, as everyone complains we're always talking about Sydney and Melbourne, so I thought I'd bring in some expertise. Do you want to maybe tell the, or first welcome Zoran, and do you want to tell the viewers a bit about why you are an expert in the Brisbane market?
Yeah, look, I'm a born and raised Brisbaneite, and I've been working as a buyer's agent in that market for nearly 10 years, or just over 10 years now in my family business. So I've been transacting real estate not just for clients but also for myself. I'm a very keen property investor in the area as well.
So why should someone buy in Brisbane or Queensland versus Sydney, Melbourne or Perth?
Yeah, look, I think Brisbane's got a great opportunity moving forward as we move through this property cycle. I think as we see the population increase, which is what we're starting to see now with interstate migration, with that sort of shift of people moving towards to Queensland, I think we're only going to see more demand for property and also obviously employment. Brisbane, as far as employment in Queensland goes, is one of the main areas of interest. So Charles, Australia is bigger than Sydney and Melbourne, isn't it?
It is, but we've been talking about Brisbane a lot in the last few weeks, particularly with the auction clearance rates being where they are for Brisbane, which has been very interesting. But I've also had a chance to speak to a lot of the guys on the ground in Brisbane, and if I went state by state, I could tell you the most positive attitude coming from real estate agents is coming out of Brisbane. Interestingly enough, yeah.
Is that because they got better weather and they're warmer and more cheerful, or in terms of there's more opportunity?
I'm talking about business turnover. Yeah. There seems to be a bucking of the trend around the countryside with Brisbane, whereas most of the areas across Australia, particularly Sydney, Melbourne, are suffering for a number of reasons. Price, generally, and then the Royal Commission into Banking and issues associated with bank approvals taking time and many of them not coming through. For whatever reason, the agents I've spoken to in Brisbane of recent times, just last week I spoke to a few of them, they said that they're actually having a really, really good run with what's going on.
That sounds good. Now, Zoran, I know a lot of people are buying in Brisbane because of the affordability. In some Sydney suburbs, $1 million only gets you a one-bedroom unit, if you're lucky. Do you want to tell us about what you'd ideally buy for an investment if someone came to you? And I think we've got some of your pictures that we'll pull up on the screen as well.
Yeah, so look, my personal strategy is to focus within that 15k radius of the Brisbane CBD. This particular property that's showing now is a great quintessential property that you would receive for the Brisbane median house price. We're also seeing a lot of opportunity to add value, such as this property we're seeing now, where we undertook a cosmetic renovation and a minor extension, and we're seeing a lot of opportunity in the market as well. But again, these typical, post-war or pre-war homes, these Queenslanders, timber homes. Look at that, mate. Wouldn't you love to have a pizza in that pizza oven?
Oh, so, I love pizza.
So, we're definitely seeing some great opportunity. There's the before photo, actually, of that one we added a deck to. This is one we purchased just close to Brisbane. So, guys, yeah, there's still some great opportunity. And proximity for your value. You can still get very close to Brisbane CBD on a good parcel of land.
Now, Charles, this is so different to, you obviously know what I buy in Sydney.
Yeah, well, that's...
Exactly.
Beer and lobster he meant. I know what he meant.
But again, is investors do need to understand a local market. They can't take their knowledge from one suburb and move to the other side of the country and then try and buy the same thing, because the local market doesn't necessarily want that.
No, it doesn't. And what Zoran's doing, there's a great marketplace in Brisbane. There's a number of older suburbs that can be going through gentrification right now that haven't gone through that process. It's almost as though you're going down to the Redfern days in Sydney and you're looking at some locations, or even the outer west of Sydney, and some of those locations in Brisbane are really ripe for it. I was up there a couple of weeks ago visiting my sister, and she lives in a fantastic location, and I was really impressed with the quality of homes. Mostly timber, mind you, but the way in which they were built and extended and renovated renovated and so on, you can really see a lot of changes going on in some of those suburbs.
Definitely.
Now, you mentioned Brisbane to a lot of people over the last couple of years, and straight away they think of high-rise units and the reputation about a potential bubble. Do you want to explain what that means from a local's perspective and how much reality is there?
Yeah, definitely. Look, we have seen a comprehensive amount of development in the last 5 years in Brisbane. 2017 saw the most settlements of units and apartments in Brisbane's history. So we're coming off the back of that now, though a lot of developers, especially with larger projects, aren't getting out of the ground with their pre-sales. And we are seeing an issue with valuing up to contract price for those off the plans. So I think that market's going to suffer. What Brisbane people realise is units have always been a secondary decision. We're still very affordable in our house market to be able to get the Australian dream of a house, land, picket fence. So until Brisbane's population is rivalling Sydney and Melbourne, I honestly believe units are still a secondary choice. But having said that, if it's a lifestyle choice, there's some great buying opportunities in Brisbane for units. We've seen price drops of 5, 10, sometimes even 15% in that market.
Now, Charles, I've just been in Vietnam for a conference over the last few days, and speaking to some of the local Asians there, they'd invested in Brisbane and Queensland, they bought off the plan, they've made silly decisions, they sell 5 years later and they still take a loss. Again, a lot of the time, if you follow the locals, it makes a hell of a difference, doesn't it?
It does, because if they were watching very, very closely the Brisbane unit market, we've been speaking about that for over 2 years, that it's a problem area and going to be even worse. And that's why, you know, Zoran's right, a lot of the developers have not started projects. I mean, we purchased one for a competition a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
2 years ago, yes.
I entered, but I didn't win.
No, you didn't. And they haven't even looked at... It doesn't even look like starting in that project. And so I think that some of those areas, and we've spoken about West End being one of those areas, some of the inner city ones, they've gone pretty well because they are close to the city and people enjoy the lifestyle. But as you get further out, some of those apartment complexes, I think they're exceptional buying or becoming that way. I had a bet with somebody, they said they won't drop under 450. I said they'll be probably 375 to 400. And I still stand by that, and I think people will be able to get a very good two-bedroom unit, particularly where somebody is not able to complete. They're going to maybe not get a reduction in price, but they're certainly going to get a lot of bonuses from the builder.
Now, very quickly, how easy is it for someone to buy interstate and to understand an interstate market?
Look, if you've got the time to delve into that market, get the boots on the ground, then you can do it. But I must be honest, you know, being state-by-state legislation when it comes to transaction of real estate, you have to have a great understanding, or at least a solid understanding of that, but also the intricacies of price. Different pockets of suburbs, you know, as we sort of alluded to just then, you know, you can have a massive price difference in the same postcode just purely because a pocket or a street. So that on-the-ground knowledge and connection that you need to establish, you could do it yourself, but it takes time, and not everyone has that time.
So always do your research. Charles, let's move on to the clearance rates.
Yeah, they're actually slightly up this week. Not a great deal. 59.1% was the clearance rate on a national level. This time last year was 66.9%. So it's still a reasonable decline, but not compared to what it has been like. It's starting to get closer and closer as the months move into what it was like this time last year. The interesting one was that Adelaide itself had the best clearance rate of all capital cities, and that's been a capital city we've spoken about highly. But Brisbane was the only one that had a better clearance rate than this time last year. So again, the Brisbane market is still bubbling along. Canberra came in at 64, just behind Adelaide at 64.8%. So there was a slight difference between the two, but when you look at those capital cities, Sydney and Melbourne haven't really been as good as normal, but Melbourne had 62.4% clearance rate with 894 auctions, and Sydney's was 57%, you know, 57.9% at, and I think they had 654 auctions. So still well down on the auction numbers and still well down on what they were this time last year.
And what's it looking like for homes being advertised?
Yeah, more. Again, it's been increasing every week now, and we've now got 8.95% more property being advertised for sale this week than we had this time last year. Again, the urgency to buy is not there, so there's a lot of property sitting on the market. There are a lot of agents asking the question, and the great Tom Panos is educating agents on how to educate sellers, because it's very much about educating sellers about the market now, not educating buyers. And that's most agents' biggest task, is to get in and educate sellers on where they should be in the market. I think Tom might talk to you about that later on, because he's got a couple of favourite lines he uses around that.
And if you listen to Tom's Sunday night rants, he tells it like it is.
Yes.
He doesn't have to, for TV, he doesn't have to keep those four-letter words to himself. What's happening with rents at the moment?
They've actually moved up in not every part of the country, but they're up 5.85% on a national level over this time 3 years ago, when you take every capital city. But you've got to remember that Darwin and Perth have been in negative territory for a very long time, and Darwin isn't improving. The only one that's improving out of those two is Perth, and Sydney itself has gone behind. So your best capital city is still in climb. Again, Brisbane has climbed up in terms of its rent amounts. Adelaide has climbed up, Melbourne has climbed up, but Sydney's gone backwards along with Darwin, and Perth is just starting to creep into the positive again.
OK, and then finally the vacancy rates.
Yeah, they're pretty good again. Melbourne's still under the 1%, 0.84%, really strong for a long time. And the Andrews government's introduced a significant number of new rules around legislation around rentals, and I don't know how that's going to go. I think it's something that you might want to investigate and check, because I think it's going to have quite an interesting impact on residential housing for renters and landlords alike. I think there's going to be quite a disruption there. Sydney came in at 2.16%, and Perth graciously came in under 8% for a while, 7.64%, and between those three capital cities it was 3.55%.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us, Charles, and see you again next week. Now, coming up, the importance of choosing the right buyer's agent when looking for a good investment, and more on border-crossing investments and why Queensland, the Sunshine State, is hot right now. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back soon.
You're watching Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.